Hello and welcome to LFC Focus. So Liverpool are back in Premier League action at the weekend, taking on Southampton at Anfield, and they have got the chance to break the club's all-time record for consecutive wins at the start of the season. We all know Liverpool have kicked off the season with 6 wins in their competitive games already, no losses, no draws whatsoever. It has been a perfect start and their best start since they had a similar record back in, I think, 1961 or something like that, and that was in the old second division as well. So Liverpool, I don't think, have ever done this in the top flight, but they have never ever started off the season with 7 wins from 7 first competitive games. So this is a chance for Liverpool to make history. And obviously, once again, we want to continue our perfect start to the Premier League campaign and continue what is looking like a procession to the Premier League title already. So I think this is a really good game for us to get another statement win, because we've won a few games quite ugly recently, and some of those games where ideally you'd want it to be a thrashing. I think the Brighton one certainly comes to mind, where we win it 1-0 and we kind of coast through a lot of the game, and there are a few moments where Brighton look like they're going to come back into it. So you can call it an ugly win, but you could also argue that Liverpool just kind of saw the game out very well and managed it well the whole way. But I think an issue that a lot of people have pointed out is if we do keep winning ugly and winning games in a scrappy manner, then opposition teams in upcoming games are going to start to smell blood and maybe think that as much as Liverpool do look like a winning machine, there's not as much danger of them steamrolling you as there maybe was last season. So I think Liverpool just need to kind of beat Southampton, ideally by a 4-0, 3-0 or even 5-0 scoreline or something like that, just to put the fear of God into future opponents once again, and obviously also to help out our goal difference and make sure we stay ahead of Chelsea, because annoyingly last weekend they did go ahead of us on goal difference, and I think it's always nice to see Liverpool at the top of the table at the end of the weekend. But at the end of the day, the 3 points always comes first. Like I said, we want to keep up our perfect record, and I think it's also very important that we get those 3 points with the fixtures we've got coming up. You know, those games against Chelsea and Manchester City, as much as I want to say that I want maximum points from all of them, because that's what Liverpool should be aiming for, there is every chance that we could come away from that with 4 points, 3 points, 2 points, 1 point, or even no points whatsoever. So we need to make sure that we put ourselves in a good enough position that if those results don't go our way, it's not a huge problem. And, you know, if you aren't going to win against Southampton, a game that should be, you know, not a gimme, but the kind of games that you look at and think that should quite easily be 3 points there, then you are going to jeopardise any chances of a Premier League title. So all things considered, a game Liverpool should be winning. Hopefully it'll end up being a really nice, easy day at the office, but with the Premier League, you just never know. So team news going into the game, Liverpool have got no fresh injury concerns whatsoever, which is absolutely great, especially when you consider this huge run of fixtures we've got coming up. You know, the last thing we need now is for injuries to start piling up. We need to have our whole squad available to us, and I think this is certainly an interesting game where I can actually see Liverpool maybe start to use the squad a little bit more when you consider the fact that there might be a little bit of fatigue. Not just the fact that we played 2 games last week against Spurs and against Paris Saint-Germain, but the fact they were both against very high quality opposition as well. So the team would have to give their absolute best performances. There was no coasting involved whatsoever in either of those games. I think Liverpool were absolutely on it from minute 1 to minute 90 in both matches. And also the fact that this is kind of lesser opposition in a way, and you know, people say it's rude to say that, but at the end of the day, Southampton aren't PSG. They haven't got Neymar or Mbappe. They're not Tottenham. They haven't got Kane or Ali or any players like that. So you kind of look at this and think, if we are going to rotate, certainly out of any of the Premier League games we've got in this stretch, and obviously you've got the League Cup game coming up as well, and you think we'll certainly put out something close to a second string side in that game. But out of all the Premier League games, this is the one where maybe you'd look at and say we can probably afford to fiddle the squad around a little bit and maybe give a few players some time off. Apart from that, in terms of team news, Dejan Lovren returned to full training this week, which is an incredibly positive sign. You know, I think it will be difficult for him to come back into the side, but like I said, with the amount of games we've got coming up, I'm certain he'll get game time, especially with that League Cup game against Chelsea on the horizon. So no fresh injury concerns, which is great. We've pretty much got a full squad to choose from, apart from, I think, Lallana is the only high-profile player who won't be available, and I think there is the possibility of a little bit of rotation this weekend. So as for how I think we're we're actually going to line up. I think in goal, definitely Alisson Becker. Can't see any reason why he wouldn't start him in this game. He has been very, very good so far this season, and long may that continue, and maybe a few more skills in this game, maybe a nice little chip over a Southampton player or anything like that, like what we saw in the Brighton game. No Cruyff turns though, because that can give people a heart attack, as we all know after the Leicester match. But yeah, I think we're going to see Alisson in goal. Then the back four, I can't see too many changes here, mainly because I think you don't really want to unsettle the back four too much, and they are playing so well together as a unit and defending so well together as a unit, to the point where they're so good now that I'd almost look at this match and, like with the Brighton game, say, even if our attack doesn't click like it has so far this season, we've had a little bit of trouble in front of goals, certainly over the last few games, created a lot of chances but haven't really finished enough of them off. The final ball hasn't quite been there. I'd trust our defence, if it is that main back four that we've chosen so far this season, if they all start, I'd trust them to keep a clean sheet. So at the end of the day, one goal could, again, like the Brighton game, end up being enough for Liverpool. So I think you go with Trent at right back, Gomez and Virgil van Dijk at centre back, and then Andrew Robertson at left back. And I think the game against Chelsea is when we will probably end up seeing wholesale changes along that back four. And then the midfield, this is where you can start to see a little bit of rotation. I think we probably go with Wijnaldum in the number 6. I think rest Henderson, because he's still maybe not quite at full capacity in terms of his fitness. Obviously, the World Cup took its toll on his fitness. He came back quite late for that. Hasn't really had a full pre-season, and I think Jurgen Klopp has been very careful in terms of how much he uses him. And given that he did start against Spurs, and he did start against... did he start against Spurs? I can't remember, but he played against Spurs, and he definitely started against PSG. I think it makes sense to not include him in this game, certainly not in the starting 11. So I think you go Wijnaldum in the 6, who is absolutely fantastic. I think Keita and Milner go either side of him. Obviously, Milner, played both games against Spurs and PSG, so you could argue maybe a little bit of fatigue there, but I think he's another one who probably won't play against Chelsea. And then there's an argument to maybe bring in Fabinho, because he finally makes his Liverpool debut against PSG. He comes on, he makes a foul. That's about it, because he's only on the pitch for about a minute or something like that. But, he does okay. I think you maybe see him as a substitute here, and then his full debut is probably going to be against Chelsea in the League Cup in a few days' time. And then obviously Keita doesn't start against PSG, so should be raring to go. And this is hopefully a game where he can absolutely shine and cause some serious damage to that Southampton back line. And then the front three, I've gone with Salah, Firmino and Mane. I think Firmino's a shoe-in, because obviously he barely played against PSG, despite the fact he has the biggest contribution of any player on the pitch with the winning goal. But he only played 20 minutes in that game. He's looked fine in training. He's got a really interesting pair of goggles on. I don't know if you guys have seen it, but it's certainly a hell of a fashion statement. He's gone a little bit Edgar Davids with his eyewear, so I'd be quite excited to see if he wears those at the weekend. Salah and Mane, I think there's an argument that maybe those two could be rested for this match. I certainly think Salah looked ever so slightly off it against PSG, and he gets subbed off for Shaqiri, and Shaqiri actually, I thought, played pretty well in those last 10 minutes. Obviously, he doesn't have a huge amount of time to show himself, but he plays a little bit of a role in the goal. He's the one who plays the corner in that leads to the goal scoring chance. So I wouldn't actually mind seeing Shaqiri maybe start in place of Mo Salah, and then Mo Salah used as an impact sub, a hell of an impact sub to have. But if I'm going to predict it, and if I'm going to put my word on the line, I'd probably go with Salah, Firmino and Mane, because that is the safe bet, and I think they'll all certainly get rests for that match against Chelsea. So as for Southampton and how they've been doing, their form has been pretty patchy so far this season. They've had some good moments and some bad moments. They had a good win against Crystal Palace, and they beat, I think it was Brighton in the EFL Cup as well, but they were very, very poor when they let their lead slip against Brighton in the league the other day. So, very patchy, very inconsistent. I think it's almost like, it's not like you're waiting to see which Southampton shows up, because different Southamptons almost show up at various points in the game. In that Brighton one, they dominated that first half. Brighton didn't have a sniff, and then they just let Brighton have the ball so much in that second half, allowed them back into the game, and Brighton ended up coming back from 2-0 down to draw the game 2-2. And I think the ineligibility of Ings is going to be a real blow for Southampton here, because when you look at their squad, it's almost a strange mix of players who are good enough for mid-table sides in the Premier League, and a few players that really you look at and think you should probably be playing in the Championship. And I think Ings is one of Southampton's best players. He's one of those players who certainly looks like a Premier League striker. He's been getting goals for them so far this season. He's caused problems for opposition defences as well. So I think the fact he's ineligible through the fact that he's suspended or something, via the fact that he's on loan there for his first season before it becomes permanent next summer, They can't play him in this game, and I think that is a terrible blow for them, but a huge boost for Liverpool. I think the area where they are strongest on the pitch is their midfield. They've got a great pairing there of Højbjerg and Lemina. Now, Lemina is a quality defensive midfielder. He came from Juventus. He had a really good season last season. I think Liverpool benefited from the fact that I'm not sure he actually played in both of our games against them. Certainly the home match against them where we won 3-0, he didn't play, and I think that was a huge blow for Southampton as well. So I think we really need to watch out for him, and Højbjerg as well, who's had a really good season so far. So they're both strong midfielders. They're both combative. They can both play the ball well as well. So it will be difficult in the centre of the park to try and win that midfield battle. But I think the most important thing is to try and bypass that midfield altogether, because as soon as we get past them, whether that's through moving through wide areas with our fullbacks, or it's potentially even just balls over the top to players like Mane and Salah and Firmino to just run onto and try and create chances like that. You know, we know that players like Wijnaldum, Milner and Keita are all capable of top quality balls over the top of midfields and stuff like that to try and break through the defensive lines. I think Southampton's defence is pretty shaky. You know, they've got good players in there like Bertrand and like Vestergaard, but they've also got players like Wesley Hoot and Cedric who just are a little bit error prone, and you look at them and you think if we targeted them, if we tried to get the ball near them, and if our players like Mane and Salah dribble in their direction, then we could just force them into errors and get goals that way. I know Wesley Hoot played a pretty poor game when we played them last time out at St Mary's. I think he was at fault for both of the goals. So Southampton just look like a side that are very patchy, not just in terms of their form this season, but also in terms of how they play in various areas of the pitch. And I think if Liverpool target the right areas and try and put the right players under pressure, then we could cause them serious problems and potentially even win at a canter. And obviously, without Ings, their only real attacking threat is Shane Long, and having watched bits of him so far this season, he doesn't look that great. He doesn't really look like he suits Mark Hughes' system at all. A lot of the time he's receiving the ball to feet, which doesn't really work for him because, you know, he's not that great on the ball. He's more about getting balls over the top and trying to beat teams on the counter and stuff like that, and creating enough one-on-one chance with the goalkeeper to score. And maybe that's what Southampton will try, because obviously they're going to look to defend an awful lot in this game. But I think with the quality of our players like Van Dijk and Gomez at centre-back, if they want to just lump balls over the top to Shane Long, then they're probably going to have no joy whatsoever. So all things considered, this is absolutely a game Liverpool should be winning. It's a game that ideally we should have wrapped up within an hour or something like that, so we can start taking our best players off. I certainly think it will be interesting if we do make a little bit of rotation and maybe bring in fringe players like Sturridge or Shaqiri, players who you don't always expect to be in the starting 11, and see how they get on in a match like this. But certainly it's one that I hope we win by a big, huge margin, not just to help our goal difference, but also to send out a strong message that Liverpool's title challenge is a serious one, and hopefully we stay top of the league come the end of the weekend. So that is all for today's video. Thank you guys very much for watching. If you did enjoy this video, then why not give it a like? If you're new around here as well, hit that subscribe button there. Check out some of the other videos that have been out on the channel over the past few days. Don't forget to follow at LFC Focus TV on Twitter, and I'll be back on Saturday evening after Liverpool have hopefully thrashed Southampton and gone back to the top of the Premier League table. Until then, bye for now.